The night sky didn't just glow, it exploded, like someone had punched a hole in reality and stuffed a Michael Bay finale through it. I woke to the fire alarm screeching and the unmistakable crackle of flames licking the air like applause from hell. I ran to the window, heart pounding, and there it was, my shed, my workshop, my pride and joy, lit up like a bonfire built by vengeance. It wasn't a flicker, it was an inferno. Flames curled upward with theatrical drama, painting orange shadows across the neighborhood. Robes flapped, phones recorded, neighbors gathered like it was the 4th of July. And then came the voice, shrill, smug, unmistakable. I warned you about that dangerous shed. Now look what happened. Karen, neon pink robe, coffee cup clutched like a scepter, standing in the street like she just vanquished a dragon. What she didn't know, what would turn her little victory lap into a faceplant on a national stage, was that she'd just committed arson on a building under active federal surveillance. And she didn't torch a shed, she lit the fuse of her own federal investigation. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. While the fire department wrestled with the blaze, 2 black SUVs rolled in behind them, quiet, no lights, no fanfare. The doors opened and out stepped the men in suits. No helmets, no hoses, just calm, calculated presence. They didn't run, they scanned. One of them nodded at me as if to say, "We're here." The other locked eyes with Karen. She froze mid-step, coffee mug suddenly less scepter and more liability. The air shifted, her face twitched in confusion. This wasn't in her HOA handbook. The agents moved with quiet purpose toward the charred frame of the workshop. One murmured into his sleeve mic, and 2 more plainclothes officers began scanning the crowd with infrared gear. Karen backed away, like she could physically unring the bell she'd just clanged, loud enough to shake federal records. An agent pulled me aside, spoke in clipped, efficient phrases. Backups, yes, encrypted, twice. Recoverable, all off-site. He gave a rare smile. Good man, we'll handle the rest. That's when I realized Karen didn't just commit a crime. She stepped into a classified operation with all the grace of a toddler kicking a hornet's nest. My name's not important, and neither is my day job. At least, that's what I used to tell people. Just a tech contractor. Quiet guy. Preferred soldering circuits over small talk. Moved into the neighborhood 2 years ago because it promised what I wanted. Silence, privacy, and fiber internet. The workshop wasn't a hobby, it was my lab. Inside those walls were prototypes under government contract, encrypted comms gear, blackout rigs for field ops, all legal, all protected. No Wi-Fi, no cameras visible from the street, just peace. Or it would have been if Karen hadn't made it her mission to patrol the neighborhood like she was auditioning for the HOA's version of Homeland Security. She had 3 clipboards, a laminated badge that said Community Compliance Lead, and the uncanny ability to appear at your door the second your trash lid was 1 inch ajar. I once saw her measure someone's grass with a ruler. She left a printed citation for a lawn gnome. For 2 years, I kept my head down. I didn't attend meetings. I didn't wave. I just kept building. Until Karen made it personal. Karen Brewster believed she was the last line of defense against suburban decay. She treated the HOA bylaws like gospel and herself as the high priestess of property perfection. If you parked slightly outside the lines, she'd slap a warning on your windshield. If your garden flag wasn't on the approved seasonal rotation, she'd file a complaint. And when it came to my workshop, her vendetta became legendary. First it was the lights, then the hum of the generator, then she claimed the structure was attracting birds in a suspicious pattern. Her latest theory? That it was a covert transmission site emitting dangerous energy. My cat won't go near it, she told the HOA board once. Clearly, it's unnatural. She wasn't just nosy, she was obsessed. The kind of obsessed that ends up on Netflix documentaries. But nothing she did crossed the line. Until it did. Until she decided the best way to protect the block was to light a match and become the local fire starter. All to prove a point no one asked her to make. What Karen didn't know, what absolutely no one in the neighborhood knew, was that 3 months before the fire, I'd been contacted by a branch of the Bureau. They were tracking a string of tech thefts, targeting private labs, especially those with federal contracts. My workshop fit the profile, and my clearance made me the perfect partner for a sting. They asked to set up passive surveillance. I agree, cameras, motion sensors, off-site backup. I didn't know until later they'd stationed a van 2 houses down. When Karen struck that match, they caught it all. Every step, every flick of the lighter, every muttered monologue about defending the community. And now, the arson wasn't just property damage, it was obstruction of a federal operation. A felony with a side of irony. The woman who lived to enforce the rules had just become a case study in how to break all of them. So there I stood, watching the last of the flames die down, agents sifting through the ashes, while Karen clutched her coffee mug like a lifeline. She wasn't arrested, not yet, but they asked her to stay put. "We'd like to speak with you about your whereabouts this evening," one said. She tried to play dumb, but the footage had timestamps. Her pink robe was visible in night vision. The accelerant was traced, and her smugness, that was long gone. By morning, word spread faster than the fire. Karen's in trouble, feds at her house. She tried to burn down a Fed shed? The memes practically wrote themselves. The quiet neighbor who never spoke? Turns out he worked with the FBI, and Karen? She just lit the match on her own federal file. The fire was out, but the neighborhood was ablaze with something else entirely: speculation. People who hadn't spoken to me in 2 years were suddenly dropping off muffins and muttering things like, "We always knew something was off with her." But Karen? Karen doubled down. While the ruins of my workshop still smoked like a warning from the gods of consequence, she was on her front lawn, bathrobe cinched like armor, proclaiming to anyone who would listen, "I warned him. I told him that shed was dangerous." "Now look what happened," she said it loud enough for the entire cul-de-sac to hear, like she expected applause. What she got instead were side eyes, phone cameras, and one neighbor who muttered, "Is she serious?" But Karen didn't care. She was rewriting the story in real time. In her version, she hadn't trespassed and committed arson. She'd performed a public service. She wasn't a suspect, she was a savior. Inside my house, the truth was taking shape a lot differently. The 2 agents from the Bureau, Russo and Hernandez, sat in my living room like they'd seen it all before. Because they had. Karen wasn't just a neighborhood headache anymore. She was officially classified as a high-risk individual with prior flags in several counties. Turns out, the fire in my workshop was the 3rd accidental incident she'd been near in 5 years. 2 others had been written off as bad wiring or garden mulch gone rogue. But the patterns were there: petty complaints, HOA disputes, vague threats, then flames. And now she'd struck federally monitored ground. "She's been on our radar," Russo said, sipping my awful coffee. "But this fast-tracked her case into something actionable." Hernandez added, "She's either covering something up or unraveling, maybe both. Either way, she's ours now." Then they showed me a blueprint for what came next. That afternoon, the crew rolled in, quiet, efficient, no markings on the trucks. They worked like stagehands, prepping for a show only a few people had tickets to. By dusk, the charred bones of my workshop had been replaced with a convincing shell. Not real, not functional, but detailed enough to pass for authentic. Inside, they'd hidden cameras, pressure sensors, and a replica of the tech Karen thought she'd destroyed. It was bait, plain and simple. A trap built from her own paranoia. Russo called it Operation Burnout. "The ashes are still warm," he said with a grin, "but the trap is cold and calculated." Every element was designed to lure her back. Cables that glowed faintly, an old blueprint strategically placed in the trash, and a new metal lock on the half door. Just enticing enough to look worth breaking. "She won't be able to resist," Hernandez said. "They never can." And sure enough, within 24 hours, Karen began spiraling. First, she sent out an HOA-wide email titled Community Threat Update Phase 2. It was an unhinged manifesto filled with phrases like rogue electronics lab, suburban destabilization, and solar radiation from unregistered antennas. She even attached a screenshot of my Amazon order history, which she somehow acquired, highlighting the purchase of lithium batteries as evidence of suspicious intent. Then she tried to host a neighborhood security briefing on her front lawn. Only 3 people showed up, one of them by accident while walking their dog. She spent 40 minutes blaming everything from declining squirrel populations to spy pigeons on my shed. Then she sent another email to a local tabloid claiming she was being targeted by deep state neighbors with government-issued humming devices. And just when you thought it couldn't get more absurd, she posted on the HOA Facebook group asking if anyone else had experienced phantom headaches since I moved in. That was when the agents told me it was happening. "She's in escalation mode," Russo said, "and that means she's coming back. People like Karen don't retreat, they reload, with printouts and paranoia." They showed me the setup one more time. Everything was ready, motion detection wired, facial recognition primed, microphones hidden in the faux breaker box. All we had to do was wait. "She'll move when she thinks no one's watching," Hernandez said, "but we're always watching." The final confirmation came late that night when Karen was caught on her own door camera whispering into her phone, "I'm gonna finish this myself." She thought she was staging her final victory lap. What she didn't know, the FBI was already waiting at the finish line. The neighborhood looked quiet, peaceful, but peace is often an illusion when federal surveillance is humming just beneath the hedges. At least a dozen agents were now embedded around the block, disguised as dog walkers, joggers, a suspiciously attentive gardening crew. I wore an earpiece, barely visible behind my glasses. Agent Russo's voice crackled in occasionally, calm as a surgeon. "Window blinds just twitched. She's watching you. Don't engage." Hidden microphones had been installed in my burned-out shed, beneath new decoy wiring that glowed just enough to raise suspicion. Everything was live. Everything was waiting. Karen had no idea she wasn't stalking a target. She was walking straight into a well-documented trap. The decoy setup was brilliant, a prototype shell made to look like a satellite uplink, complete with a blinking green light that pulsed every few seconds like it had something to say. The agents had even thrown in fake blueprints, tossed casually in the trash, stamped, restricted, federal use only. Karen saw them. We know, because she took pictures. Her paranoia was being played like a piano, each key struck with precision. Agent Hernandez put it best. She's the kind of person who thinks blinking lights mean conspiracy, so we gave her the fireworks show she's always wanted. It worked. Karen spent the next day pacing her lawn, pretending to weed a flower bed while eyeing my shed with laser focus. The trap was set, and like a moth to flame, Karen crept toward her downfall. At exactly 12:14 a.m., her front door creaked open. Karen emerged in all black, head down, backpack slung low. She moved with all the subtlety of a cat burglar on roller skates, crouching behind shrubs, holding a flashlight, wrapped in red cellophane like she was filming a found-footage horror movie. The agents whispered in my ear, "She's moving. Cameras on. Do not engage." She reached the shed, pulled a bottle from her bag, the same accelerant used before. She began pouring it in a slow, deliberate pattern around the base of the decoy device, pausing only to glance over her shoulder like the star of her own spy novel. Then came the match. She struck it, held it up. "Now," said Russo. Out of the shadows, 3 agents closed in like phantoms. One grabbed her wrist mid-strike. The match fizzled in her hand. She let out a shriek, high-pitched, primal, confused. The other 2 agents restrained her while shouting the charges. "Karen Hollowell, you are under arrest for arson, tampering with federal property, and interfering with an active surveillance operation." She screamed about her rights, about property values, about chemtrails. None of it mattered. The entire takedown was captured from 5 angles, complete with thermal imaging and high-def body cams. Karen's HOA reign had just combusted in 4K resolution. The next morning, the footage leaked. Someone clipped her scream into a remix titled "Karen Gets Burned." It trended in less than 12 hours. The internet christened her with new names: Poco Queen, Agent Karen, Commander Combustion. Neighborhoods across the country sent messages of solidarity. Even my least tech-savvy neighbor mailed me a meme, Karen screaming mid-arrest with the caption, "When your bylaws meet the Bill of Rights." The internet had rendered its verdict. Karen wasn't a hero. She was a cautionary tale. And this fire, It wasn't the beginning, it was the ashes of her last stand. They say paper trails never lie. In Karen's case, hers practically shouted. After her arrest, the FBI dug deep, and they didn't need long. Within 72 hours, forensic analysts traced a string of burner email accounts back to Karen's IP address. She had been funneling HOA funds through bogus maintenance companies, some with names like Cleanscape Solutions LLC, which didn't even have a website. One account was registered to a local diner's Wi-Fi. Another, hilariously, was linked to her nephew's Minecraft server. But the kicker? Her financial statements. Dozens of cash withdrawals labeled Emergency Beautification Funds, or HOA Tactical Readiness. Her finances were cooked longer than a Thanksgiving turkey, seasoned with fraud and stuffed with delusion. The fallout hit fast. At the next emergency board meeting, held in the community park because the clubhouse was now sealed under federal order, 3 of the remaining HOA board members resigned on the spot. One even left his resignation scribbled on a Wendy's napkin. The residents didn't just cheer, they mobilized. A vote was held right there, lawn chairs and lemonade in hand. Pete, the same neighbor who once joked about my workshop with a 6-pack in hand, was unanimously elected HOA president. His campaign slogan? No more nonsense. Within days, the bylaws were gutted, fines rescinded, and Karen's clipboard was officially banned from all future meetings. It wasn't just a new chapter, it was a whole new book. 2 weeks later, I received a plain white envelope in the mail. Inside was a letter on federal letterhead, an official commendation from the FBI. They thanked me for my cooperation, calm and technical support during what they called an ongoing national effort to combat localized domestic disruption and financial misconduct. Alongside the letter was something unexpected, an offer to consult on civilian surveillance prevention. Apparently, my workshop had impressed some folks in high places. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or feel flattered, but it felt good to be seen not as a nuisance, but as someone who helped take down a fraud masquerading as a patriot. The neighborhood bloomed, literally, in the months that followed. Families who had once been paranoid about HOA patrols now planted new gardens, hung string lights, flew flags of every color. Kids played freely on sidewalks again. The wind spinner guy, he put up 5 more. It wasn't just the landscape that changed, it was the spirit. One neighbor said it best at the next cookout. I finally exhaled. After 5 years, I can breathe again. Someone printed t-shirts that said Karen Free Zone. They sold out in 2 days. The power of peace, it turns out, is louder than any rule book ever written. But just when we thought the saga was over, word broke. Karen would be representing herself in court. No lawyer, no strategy, just pure, unfiltered HOA ego. She'd submitted 92 pages of handwritten arguments, including citations from the HOA handbook and something she called neighbor energy law. Rumor has it her opening line was going to be, "I was elected by the people, and they were ungrateful." The only thing more tragic than her defense was the fact she still believed she was the hero. It was the courtroom performance of the decade, and not in the way Karen hoped. The moment she walked in carrying a binder labeled Truth Files Vaulton 1 in glittery letters, everyone knew this wasn't going to be your average legal proceeding. She rejected a public defender, claimed lawyers were agents of the HOA deep state, and proceeded to represent herself with a slideshow. The first slide, a blurry screenshot of my shed overlaid with red arrows and flames she added in Microsoft Paint. She cited HOA meeting notes, a Facebook post from 2019, and, this is not a joke, a blog article titled Energy Vortexes and the Suburban Threat. The judge didn't interrupt at first, maybe out of curiosity, maybe disbelief, but once she referenced an HOA subclause about emotional zoning violations, he finally leaned forward and said, "Ms. Hollowell, this is a court of law, not a neighborhood Facebook group." The prosecution, by contrast, was surgical. They had surveillance footage, forensic evidence, bank statements, burner email logs. They even played the audio of Karen whispering to herself as she lit the match, "They'll thank me for this one day." It took the jury less than 2 hours to deliberate. Karen Hollowell was found guilty on multiple counts: arson, fraud, tampering with federal property, and obstruction of justice. She was sentenced to 7 years with no eligibility for parole for the first 3. She was also ordered to pay restitution to the neighborhood HOA, which the judge clarified was not for her to ever serve in again. The courtroom was silent as the gavel fell, not from shock, from relief. The day the verdict came down, the neighborhood threw a cookout, not in celebration of someone's fall, but in honor of the return of sanity. The new HOA board, led by Pete, of course, drafted a formal apology letter signed by nearly every resident. It read in part, "We regret that our silence allowed this chaos to grow. You stood against it with calm, truth, and a whole lot more grace than we deserved. There were burgers, sparklers, even a chocolate cake shaped like a clipboard with good riddance in icing. No one missed the irony." But Karen's story didn't fade quietly. It exploded online. Her trial footage, especially the clip art presentation, was edited into TikTok memes, parody reenactments, and even a musical remix. Someone made a fake trailer for a Netflix docuseries titled Ho How, House of Arson. Reddit threads popped up daily, debating whether she was delusional, dangerous, or both. One user commented, "She burned down her reputation better than her arson." And honestly, they weren't wrong. She went from clipboard queen to internet cautionary tale, a walking warning label for anyone who takes HOA power too seriously. Now the workshop is rebuilt stronger, smarter, and fitted with tech that would make a sci-fi villain sweat. The air's clearer, the neighbors are friendlier, and peace, real peace, hums just under the buzz of garden shears and porch fans. Karen's saga? Closed. And me? I'm back to building in quiet, but this time with the full assurance that the next fire I face will only come from a soldering iron. There is something poetic about surviving a fire, especially one lit by the very person who claimed to be protecting the community. But what I learned goes beyond flames and fines. This was never just about a shed. It was about how power, when unchecked, can twist into something unrecognizable. So here's the truth. Don't fight chaos with chaos. Fight it with clarity. Paper trails, not shouting matches. Legal channels, not angry porch showdowns. Facts are flashlights in HOA darkness. And once you shine enough of them, even the most intimidating clipboard starts to look like what it really is. Just paper. If you're dealing with your own HOA horror story, here's what I learned and what I hope helps you. First, read your local city ordinances. Most HOA rules can't override municipal law, no matter how many times Karen insists otherwise. Second, document everything, every violation notice, every email, every voicemail. Make a folder, timestamp it. It may feel excessive until it's the most powerful thing you own. Third, know your rights. Every state has laws about property, privacy, and governance. You don't need a law degree. You just need a little research and the will to not let nonsense become the norm. What happened in our neighborhood wasn't just a legal victory. It was a cultural reset. People realized they didn't want to be ruled by lawn codes and noise complaints. They wanted community, connection, conversation, and coffee. There's been a lot more of that. One neighbor even started a good vibes only book club. Another set up a weekly game night. What replaced Karen's reign wasn't more rules, it was more humanity. Real neighbors bring muffins, not mandates. They lend rakes. They wave from the driveway. They ask, "Need help?" instead of, "Are you in violation?" So if this story resonated with you, if you ever faced down a petty power trip in your own backyard, here's your moment. Drop your HOA horror story in the comments. Let's shine more flashlights together. Hit subscribe if you want more tales of justice served with a side of satire. And give this story a like if you've ever been fined for something ridiculous, like a non-regulation garden gnome or wind chimes that dared to tinkle after 8 p.m.